Adrian Newey, Red Bull's technical director, the guy that has now made the RB18 and 19 some of the most dominant cars in recent era. Adrian Newey talks about a problem that could be a huge risk to Formula One. I mean, look at the Red Bull team right now. Look at the RB18, look at the RB19 that we currently have. Domination at its finest, a car that is fantastic practically everywhere, made by this guy. What's the current status right now in Formula One? Is it a problem going on into the future? And why Adrian Newey believes it is such a huge risk of what's going to happen in the new regulations. Well, currently in Formula One right now, we have obviously the Red Bull team, the pairing of Max and Sergio Perez, who have ruined our season. No, I'm joking. They have obviously not ruined it. They're killers. I mean, look at what Adrian Newey has brought out in this car. He has made an animal out of the car, honestly. The car is a beast everywhere that it goes. It's dominating in an era that should be pretty hard to dominate in. And I will mention that later going on into the video. It goes along with his problem that he talks about. He makes a valid point as to what he talks about into this interview. He talks about even the Ferrari, how Ferrari offered him a job. He mentions that moving to Ferrari would be a pain. He doesn't have the same exact type of team. Hence why he did not make that move.
Been involved in Red Bull more or less from the start. I feel kind of, I'm 64, to moving teams is always a huge work.
In the 7 to 8 races that we've had so far, now going into the Canadian Grand Prix, Red Bull has won every single weekend. And they've had a couple of 1-2s. They've always been on pole position with the exception of Baku, which somehow Leclerc pulled the pole position. They have had the most dominant car. It is made by this guy that we all know that has been really used in the Formula One world so much this year. It's funny that now we're really giving him the credit that he deserves. He has made outrageously good cars throughout his whole entire career. From being with McLaren to being in earlier teams, his innovation designs have just been continuously better and better and better. And now we really get to see the full form of him in really the floor era. I mean, we saw him what he did with the Vettel era, and I feel like he's doing it again with the Max Verstappen era. What those eras had in common, something that really made Adrian Newey stand out in those eras, was aerodynamic efficiency. Now, while the Renault engine was great for Vettel, it was the aero efficiency that really made them outstanding. I mean, in the McLaren, the Mercedes engine was great, and so was for Ferrari. The Ferrari engine was great in their car as well. Every team had a good engine, but the aero is what really made it so amazing. Now, going into this 2023 season, it's the same thing. I feel like every engine is pretty close. I mean, like, the Mercedes engine might be a little bit off to the Honda engine, the Red Bull engine that we currently have. Maybe the Renault engine's a little bit further behind, but it's pretty similar. All in all, every engine has its strengths, every engine has its weaknesses. I mean, the Red Bull clearly seems to have the best car. I don't think that they have the best engine. I think when it comes to power, if the Ferrari could get the reliability down, they, in my opinion, have the fastest engine. So what is this current really big risk that Adrian Newey is talking about? He is referring to the 2026 season that we have upcoming. I mean, yes, there is some time to it, but that is the new regulations. And what does he talk about? He makes a valid point. He talks about that the actual engine regulations in 2026 will change. And he brings up that in the past, like 2014, when the engine regulations did change, I mean, of course he mentions 2014 when the Red Bull stopped existing of being the best car. He talks about it being, there will be a new type of dominance being brought to the sport. It's funny that he mentions this. Right now we have a dominance in the sport. Is it really far off? I don't think so. I do think that the teams are actually going to catch within the year, but still. Regardless of the fact, it still is a pretty dominant season by Red Bull. Pretty dominant. It has been dominant. So he brings up the 2014 season with Mercedes. Now, if you look back to that year, they were practically a second ahead of everybody in pace. It was pretty ridiculous. Even this Red Bull isn't a second ahead. It's about 5 to 6 tenths ahead of the Aston Martin for most race pace, really, races. The car was so outrageously fast. Now, yes, was it aerodynamically efficient? It was. It was a great car in a lot of things, but its engine was really what powered it and made it so strong. In the straights, really just in general powering that car. It was so reliant on engines, and it took a long time for teams to actually develop their engines to be able to compete and fight in most race weekends. Now, 2016 was also a dominant year. Same type of engines. They changed up the regulations a little bit in 2017 to slow down the Mercedes. That's where we saw Ferrari actually be a lot more competitive. The engine was pretty close. We saw the illegal engine in 2019. I mean, if anybody remembers, in 2021 in Brazil, that Mercedes was flying when they stuck in a new engine. I mean, the engine regulations were out of this world. And he brings up that actually, as a team, for aerodynamic efficiency, if you want to catch up in aero, it really only takes you like a month or two to develop the parts, really bring it in, map it, plan it out. I mean, probably for him, the guy that sees air, doesn't take him very long to figure it out. But for other teams, sure. Let's not say that it won't take as long as obviously an engine. An engine is something that needs to be manufactured in the factory. It needs to be looked at. It takes a while for it to be brought out. For the reliability purposes, will it actually perform what it does on the track? It's a much more mechanical process. It's not as easy as sticking on a new side pod and saying, hey, this is going to be efficient here, here, and here because it's mapped out for us. A lot more tests have to be ran. It takes a longer period of time. So if the engine regulations in 2026 are outrageous and like, let's say the Honda engines are going to be a lot faster. I think I'm going to bring up another point later in this video as to why I think he's mentioning this, but let's say the Honda engines are insane going to 2026. It'll be a lot harder for a team to catch up to the engine regulations and the aerodynamic, really, regulations that we have right now, going from 2022 to 2025. Because there is an engine freeze now. No team can actually upgrade its engine right now. Currently, it's all about reliability and whether or not you are actually really making the car stand out in its aero efficiency. That is the whole thing as to why Red Bull is so fast this year. He says that there could be a big gap for a while. I mentioned the point before. It's a mechanical process. It takes a long time for teams to kind of figure this out. Is he correct on this? What's better? Having an aerodynamic type of season where it's more reliant on the parts going onto the car, or really the internal part of the car being done? Now, obviously, internal is super important in 2022 and ongoing, but the way that it's done, with the engine freeze, it's really reliant on that they nail down how the outside of the car looks. Now, yes, it will matter for future reference as well, even in 2026, but if you nail that engine, you'll be able to get down the aero efficiency. It's a lot easier. Does he make a good point? Is this valid? Well, let's go into why I think he is talking about this. Now, Adrian Newey is a smart guy. He has made brilliant cars. And like I said, the dominant era with Vettel from 2010 to 2013, where he won 4 years in a row, ended with an engine regulation. Now, Red Bull had a very strong engine in the Renault, but that car was just like butter when it was going through the air. The innovations that he designed, what he was able to do with that car. I mean, Vettel's V type of driving style also very much helped that car. But when the engine regulations hit and Mercedes came out with a booming engine, they were nowhere to be found. They weren't even close to that Mercedes pace. And I think that really struck to him. It took him from 2014 all the way till 2021 for the Mercedes to get nerfed, for them to actually catch up when it came to the car being just as good. It was something that they were lacking for a very long period of time. So I think now, with the new fear of really Red Bull and Ford working together, I think part of him is having doubts. I mean, I even see Max Verstappen complaining about Honda kind of pulling a fast one, going to Aston Martin. I think they really think Honda is going to come out swinging into 2026. Now, Red Bull is the type of team to talk. They love to talk about new stuff coming up. Why could it be a disadvantage? Why could it be an advantage? Why they're slow here? Why they're fast here? I like that about them. They're very open and they really make a lot of comments and stuff, but it is kind of easy to see what they're trying to get at with certain things that they mention in certain statements. Obviously, he seems like the smartest guy when it comes to just making the car so efficient. Look at what he's done with this car. So if there's any chance of it still being an efficient car but not being able to perform because of an engine, he will bring something up, and I can kind of get his points. All in all, I don't really know where I stand with this. I don't know if I would rather have it be more dependent on how the cars are looking on the outside and the efficiency going through the car, or having really both to play with. I mean, back in the day, when the cars were pretty competitive and on a standstill, really, I mean, look at 2012. They were all very similar in speed. Sure, I mean, Alonso was outperforming the car, but still, it was pretty competitive between the McLaren, the Red Bull, the Ferrari, even the Lotus would sometimes jump in there. So yes, it was pretty competitive and fun to watch. Now, I would love for it to be like that again, going into the new regulations, but they could have played with everything that they wanted to back at that time. So that's kind of where I stand. I think the engine regulations in 2026 are going to be good. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you believe that Adrian is right? Do you think this will ruin F1? Do you think this will play a bigger factor into F1? Let me know your thoughts down below. Please leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.